rural development, blah, 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 program on the 17th of August of this week. And this is his first policy announcement since they came into office, and it indicates a broader sentiment within the new sort of ANC hegemony that, you know, we've abandoned the rural masses, we've missed the point, we've sort of lost the, if you will, the core of the liberation agenda by focusing only on cities and metropolitan areas. And in fact, urban has become something of a little bit of a swear word within government thinking at the moment. So, I mean, your broader analysis is of course, is very challenging in that regard, because it basically suggests that we really need to understand at a much more fundamental level how the economy is anchored in space and so forth. But given that you participated in some of the governmental forums in South Africa before, you were part of the ICT, I think, advisory group that advised President Mbeki. We do still say his name, by the way. We haven't completely forgotten him. I was curious what your thoughts would be about how one could intervene into this political milieu and this political culture at this moment to begin to bring this message home, and specifically, of course, to demonstrate the dependence of rural development and rural jobs on the vitality of urban economies. But you have some thoughts to share on that. I think it would be incredibly helpful. And then in terms of Cape Town, as you know, we had the OECD in to come and help us open up this discussion about thinking about Cape Town futures and politics within a regional metropolitan context and condition. I think it was fantastic for mid-level policy managers within the public institutions, for university academics who need to compensate their meager incomes with consultancy work. And because, you know, the OECD wants all kinds of statistical verification before they're allowed to put their brand to anything. But I suppose the point that I'm coming to is that what we have found is that because of the particular political culture in terms of party political oppositions around fundamental policy questions, it's been virtually impossible to move the debate forward. Now, that condition, I would contend, is pretty normal in most parts of the world, and especially in urban regions. So, again, I was curious around specifically the political and the institutional response that is required to begin to bed this debate and this framework down to address some of the challenges you raised at the end of your talk. And specifically whether you have any ideas about institutional response, because what's clear is that we've already got a metropolitan government, but the metropolitan region, of course, is larger. And we need a kind of dynamic interaction between the different levels of government that can respond at that scale. But the institutional form is so politically contested as to make it impossible to generate a response. So again, if you have any thoughts on that, I think it would be incredibly helpful. And then, of course, your point about the role of universities and the idea of the entrepreneurial university, of course, for an applied research center like the ACC is music to our ears. But how? You know, have you got any specific ideas about, given that you are, for your entire professional life has been embedded in different academic institutional traditions, from the Francophone version to the American system to the Spanish system, etc. Have you got ideas about how does one shake up this institution? How does one get this orientation going? And particularly at the fundamental levels of the incentives of the system, how prestige is recognized, etc., etc. I think that would be incredibly valuable. And then I suppose one last final comment and question. Again, your work is different to many of the other macro-social theorists in that you've always recognized that globalization has also been the lifeblood or the source of vitality for the illegal and the criminal economies of the world, and we've seen this dramatic expansion of it. Now, these issues are really fundamental in South Africa because we've got over 30% unemployed. We've got a highly integrated formal economy into the global financial system. And it is fairly obvious that the criminal economy is a big part of how it is that such a large part of the labor force can be unemployed, but yes, there's not sort of absolute destitution. But of course, the social cost in terms of violence, social dislocation, etc., is profound. And given that it's layered into the apartheid fabric of social exclusion and racialized social exclusion, I think it's a pretty profound and deep crisis. So I was wondering whether beyond the point of recognizing that it is also given a life, or it's allowed the expansion of illicit and illegal and criminal economies, whether there isn't something more fundamental theoretically about the place, the position, the scale of criminal economies. especially if we look at the penetration into the financial markets and so on and so on. So that's just a very personal question, because I think it is something it's a debate we haven't really had in South Africa in any systematic way, yet it is such a big part of the complexities that we deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Most interesting. Maybe I can quickly address your questions, and then we open the debate, because
Rather do that than open it up and
yeah,
okay.
but you know, the thing is that they're so important points and so well presented. I recognize very much some of the themes in your book that I have read with that great interest. Well, let me go just simply quickly reacting to some of well, I do think that Africa in general, if one can say something in general about Africa, which I don't think, but let's say that I don't see, every time that I go into either the data or in the local situation in Africa, I do not see a major difference with what's happened in other areas of the world in terms of the logic. Of course, the extent of social exclusion, the extent of marginalization and poverty is much greater, but depends where you are, because that's exactly the logic of the networks. The global networks include and exclude at the same time. So the proportions, my favorite example is that everybody knows about Palo Alto, where Stanford universities and key in Silicon Valley. Nobody knows about East Palo Alto, which is exactly on the other side of the freeway, and which is a black and Hispanic ghetto in the most desperate situation of crime, marginality, unemployment, bad schools, everything that you could find in any township here. And it's just 3 kilometers, okay? But they are in different logic. One is highly connected network, the other is completely marginalized for a number of historical reasons. Node, or actually no node, is no node, and is connected to the other nodes of criminality and poverty. So in that sense, I think that the logic of exclusion and inclusion, both through networks and disconnection from the networks, I find it also in Africa, and also the cumulative logic, that the more you are connected to the network, the more you attract greater value, greater people, and the greater connection to the networks of the world. So this is a tremendously devastating logic, because you ultimately cut yourself from your interland, from your country, from your culture, your people. And governments, even with the best intentions, they have to keep the connection to the global system going, to the networks of value, because otherwise they don't have a budget to do anything. So the logic goes that governments and capital and educated people and everything goes into these nodes, and therefore you find many of the activities in Cape Town, in terms of university, in terms of finance, in terms of highly educated people, great restaurants, all this connected to the top level of the world. You are not marginal at all. You are a vibrant metropolis linked to all kinds of high-valued activities with incredibly sophisticated people. And at the same time, you have all the other, which is the large majority of the population and of the city. And then, yes, jobs is the fundamental issue. Jobs is the fundamental issue. But the most important question is how you generate jobs. Because in order to generate jobs, you need to generate value from where you can extract the resources to then generate jobs. So this is a fine-tuning operation. I guess that tourism can generate a lot of entry-level jobs in Cape Town, but on the condition of not destroying the goose of the golden eggs, because you are never going to be competitive in terms of great beaches. You have great beaches, but to reach here, there are all kinds of other great beaches near the United States, near Europe, etc. So this is not the main. The main thing is related to culture, to wildlife, to history, today I had 2 hours without work, finally 2 hours. And well, so I use it to go to the museum on the slave tradition, and then from there to the Malay neighborhood and visiting all this. And I found it extraordinarily interesting and fascinating. I talked to good people there. So this kind of tourism generates a lot of it's labor intensive, and it's not simply the mass tourism based on drinking and laying in the beach during the day to start again in the night. But I would say I don't see an intelligent tourist policy in Cape Town, frankly. I don't. And too much going to the theme park, etc. So I think there is now unemployment. Well, I had been on record many times saying that there is no unemployment in developing countries. That unemployment is a privilege of developed countries. Because if you really don't have any employment, any job, you die. It's only when you have an unemployment insurance, and therefore it's the labor aristocracy that can be unemployed. But most people do something. They do something. There's some survival activity. They never stop doing something. They always work in every kind of activity. And that's called informal. Now, informal employment is about 50% of urban employment in Latin American cities. 50%. They are counted in many cases as unemployed or usually as underemployed. Underemployed in relationship to what? What is the norm? You know, so it means that they work from time to time, 3 days a month, to get some level of help, and then the rest of the time they do other things. But they work non-stop, doing every possible thing. One part of it is certainly the criminal economy. But people work. So the issue is how you stimulate the kind of entrepreneurialism of self-employment, etc., without, while protecting it and without killing it. And this is a very old debate in Latin America. How you keep this grassroots informal entrepreneurialism at the same time creating some basic social security protection, etc. But the world is not going toward formal salarization of the labor force, but toward the informal self-employment of the labor force, everywhere. Among other things, because the high-level activities, the advanced services activities, the high-tech, etc., everybody's consulting with everybody. The notion of these large multinational corporations, automobile, etc., providing thousands of jobs is gone, because these corporations are gone, basically. They are being downsized, shrunk, and therefore what you have still in that sector is the mining industry. But the mining industry, as Nico Klute was telling me that one of the Botswana development programs was titled "Diamonds Are Not Forever," so which I think is a great line, and gold neither. You know, so the notion here is that a much more flexible, informal, semi-formal, entrepreneurial, self-employed economy, usually with low productivity but a lot of employment generation, is what is going on in most of the world. So it's building on that rather than the notion that we are going to have suddenly job generation at the level of major factories coming in and creating an industrial working class. It's simply not going to happen. Not here, not anywhere else. The last wave was in China, and they're moving away from that at this point. Rural development. I agree, but what I said is not that I am not in favor of rural development. What I said is that this is not going to stop migration and metropolitanization. On the contrary, the experience in the world is the more you make a productive agriculture, the fewer people you need, and the more jobs you eliminate in the agriculture. So it actually accelerates rural exodus. So if much fewer people will live much better, and that's good, that's rural development. But the notion that you are going to fix in low-skill agricultural activities a large segment of the population, it has been, I cannot have a view on this case in